Hey you, don't watch that, watch this.
This is a 14-inch sycamore bowl blank, which I'm mounting onto a faceplate. I'm just using my impact driver here to put the screws in, and using the mounting jig that I made in a previous video. It's on the lathe and it's got quite a wobble on it. Although it's running fairly true, there is quite a wobble, and this is down to the density difference in this wood. It's got a big knot running through it, and it would really offset the balance by the weight, where the wood around the knot is much denser. I'm just starting to true it up here and shape it, and just so I can increase the lathe speed a bit. I'm just doing some push cuts here. I didn't run straight across the face. I started putting the curve on because by doing that you actually, in effect, you do run across the edge of the bowl blank and it trues up as you go. But yeah, it was quite a difficult blank to turn, that's putting it mildly. This knot I didn't think would be too much trouble, but it was horrendous trouble. And in hindsight, I'd have probably been better off, well, using a different blank for this project, that would have been good, or actually mounting it the other way round. I'd have probably had less bother if I'd mounted it the other way round. I'm doing some push cuts here using my 3/8 bowl gouge, which is very sharp. You can see the lovely shavings that are all building up on my arm. And they were getting quite hot, these shavings, and I've resisted using a turning glove for safety reasons. You know, I know a lot of professional turners use them, but I know a lot of people really frown upon people using gloves. But I actually burnt my hand at some point doing this because the shavings got so hot. So I ended up having to go in the house and hunt through some old sailing gear, and I found an old sailing glove, which is a fingerless glove and tight fitting, and you'll see I wear that in a bit in the video. And it just protects your fingers from these hot shavings that are coming off. Just continuing to remove more wood and shape the bowl. Wasn't the easiest to turn because there's dense knot running through part of it, but it was going alright. Getting a lot of shavings coming off, still red hot, still haven't got my glove on. I'm just trying to give it a bit of shape now. Just trying to get the curve that I'm after. Here I'm starting to do a bit of shear scraping using the bowl gouge. This is a very effective way of smoothing out any lumps and bumps. Also doing that to contour the bottom properly. I start off doing a bit of shear scraping, then doing a couple of push cuts across the bottom of the bowl, just to make sure that the contour's correct on the bottom of the bowl, and to get rid of the rough wood, the sawn wood from the surface of the blank. I've got the basic shape that I want, and now I'm just refining it really, getting rid of any ridges and bumps and grooves before sanding. I've moved the tool rest round and I've marked out the diameter for the recess for the chuck jaws, and I'm using a parting tool here to cut the recess. It's for an 89mm set of chuck jaws, and I'm just working my way across, removing the wood. Once I've done this with the parting tool, I then use a skew chisel as a negative rake scraper just to neaten it up and create a slight undercut for the chuck jaws to lock into. I start sanding at this point with the Simon Hope rotary sanding system, but the knot was slightly unstable, the edges of it were lifting, and so having a bit of trouble. So I know I sanded it fairly smooth at this point, but then I've got to stabilise this knot, otherwise I'm not going to get a good finish. I'm using some extra thin CA glue here to stabilise the knot, just running that around the edge of the knot, and the extra thin stuff wicks in really nicely, goes deep into the knot there and stabilises it. And I then switched to some power sanding once that's set, and that gave a nice result. Then a couple of coats of cellulose sanding sealer, making sure it's well covered. The sanding sealer's dry and been denibbed, so I'm now using some Yorkshire Grit to work the surface. Put quite a lot on and work it well. It gets very smooth. Here I'm buffing away the Yorkshire Grit that's done its job. It gives a fantastic finish. It's a very satisfying part of the process. Applying some Hampshire Sheen high gloss, and then buffing it all up. Comes out beautiful, lovely finish on that, nice bit of chatoyancy. I've turned the bowl round and mounted it in the chuck jaws with them in expansion mode using the recess I created earlier. First thing I'm doing is just truing up the face, doing a bit of shear scraping across the front using the bowl gouge, just to true it up, eliminate a little bit of wobble there. I'm now starting to hollow using my 3/8 bowl gouge. Just working my way backwards and forwards there, from the outside towards the centre. The flutes are angled at roughly 45 degrees and I'm rubbing the bevel. Just continuing with the hollowing process. Takes a little bit of time on a blank this size. I'm just defining where I want the rim to start. I'll then do a push cut across the face there just to remove a little bit of the bulk. It just gives me a start on the hollowing. These are the final cuts with the bowl gouge, with the hollowing. Just removing a bit more bulk and removing a few ridges. I've got the shape roughly as I want it. And here I'm switching to my Robert Sorby heavy duty scraper, which I'm just getting rid of all these ridges, but also refining the depth and checking the depth as well to make sure I'm not going too deep. But this is nice and sharp, as you can see by the shavings coming off, and I've got my glove back on because it was getting hot. Light cuts with a sharp tool, that's the way with these scrapers. I'm angling it downwards there to create a negative rake, but you must be very careful. You can see this horrendous knot, which I had to stabilise with more CA glue on the inside, and there was a big bark inclusion which actually left a hole, not right through, but it left a sizable dent in the on the inside of the blank, and I had to very carefully cut back to get that as flat as possible. I took the bowl slightly thinner than I was originally intending, but it actually worked well. It's a nice slim bowl now, it's lovely. But here I'm just doing nice gentle cuts. I had to resharpen the scraper several times, but these heavy duty bowl scrapers do a great job. Lovely stable cuts and no vibration on them. They've got a nice big handle, nice heavy bit of steel. I'm just doing the finishing scrapes here, just neatening it all up. Now power sanding. You see there's still a little bit of a wobble on this wood, and that's down to that knot. And it really was a so-and-so. That's all sanded now, and I'm now marking out where I'm going to cut the recess. I had to change plans completely because of this knot. I had to cover the knot with my design, so I've had to put a much broader recess on the inside of this bowl so that it covers up the knot. Some knots look good in wood, add a feature. This was just a big ugly blemish that needed covering up. So I'm just checking the depth of this, because it's got, for this inlay project, it's got to be a 3mm depth. I'm just checking I've got my depth right. And I'm now using the parting tool. I'm putting a series of what I would call depth orientation grooves right across the recess, and I'm making sure they're all 3mm. That way I know that I'm removing the same amount of wood right the way across. Otherwise it's easier to run out of true. If you were just cutting across, you could end up with part of the recess being shallower than you wanted or deeper than you wanted. So I'm just cutting a series of grooves that when I say are all 3mm. I was making myself a lot of work by making this recess as wide as this, but I didn't want to waste this blank. It was, they're not cheap, these blanks, and I wanted to make the most of it. It actually worked out really well in the end, as you'll see. I'm now joining up the grooves so that I will hopefully end up with a recess that is a consistent 3mm deep right the way across. The inlay material I'm using is 3mm thick, and that's why I wanted this recess to be of the correct depth. Just neatening up the recess. I'm not bothered about getting it too smooth because I've got to glue things to this, so I want a bit of a key to the surface, but I'm just getting rid of the ridges. This is some transparent coloured acrylic sheets, plexiglass or perspex, whatever you want to call it, and I've peeled the backing off and I'm spraying it with a white acrylic primer just to opaque the back and give it a nice bright backing to the coloured acrylic sheets. This is 3mm acrylic sheet which I cut into little tiles. They're little white back tiles now, and I used some quick setting epoxy to set out the middle line of tiles, so it gives me a baseline to work to. I'm then using black Milliput epoxy putty as the grout. All the rest I squidged in individually, putting putty around each one, and it took hours. It took over 2 hours to do this. It was very, very tedious. Looks a right mess at the minute, but it'll come out all right. It's back on the lathe for the reveal, as I call it. And I used Robert Sorby hardwood scraper with a bowl rest, and you can see the shavings that are coming off. Mixture of acrylic and black Milliput makes a right mess. Make sure you wear dust masks, a proper respirator dust mask. But you can see I'm mainly cutting the Milliput back at this point. Very blunting on the tools, the acrylic is. The Milliput's not too bad, but the acrylic is, so I had to resharpen the scraper quite a lot. And the knot's still giving me trouble because it means the wood had moved a fraction overnight, but it meant it wasn't running quite as true as I'd have liked. So some part of the inlay's slightly thinner than other bits. I switched to my heavy duty bowl scraper at this point, which I had to sharpen numerous times as well. This did take a long while. I've edited a lot of this out, but the pattern's appearing now. I'd set them in as random a pattern as I could. I'm not very good at random. I like things to be ordered, but yeah, I was trying to keep it as random as possible. I'm just getting rid of any ridges. Just doing a bit of more scraping here, angling it down to form a negative rake. And here I'm power sanding. Got my dust extraction on, but dust still goes everywhere. I'm power sanding, making sure I'm getting a nice contour. And I'm going up to 600 this time, a bit finer than usual because of the acrylic. And I'm now putting 2 coats of sanding sealer on this. Making sure it's all well covered. And the colour starts to pop when you do this, and it starts to look good. Now it's the Yorkshire Grit time. I love this stuff, really love it. It's fantastic, gives lovely finish. But I put quite a lot on and I work it well. Keep working it and working it and working it, and it gets finer and finer and gives a finer and finer finish. Put it on with the lathe stationary. And I think I had the lathe running at about 600 RPM. But you can see I put quite a lot of it on there. And I use the same bit of cloth to work it. You feel the grit getting finer. Make sure you work at the whole bowl surface. It's very satisfying. I'm going around the back of the bowl a little bit because I've got a few sticky fingerprints on the back, which I've had to just sand away, and then this is buffing away the Yorkshire Grit. It's done its job and everything's looking good. Hello everyone. This was the main event this weekend. This is a 14-inch sycamore bowl with acrylic and Milliput inlay, and it's transparent acrylic, so I backed it with white to make it brighter, but it's actually got quite a three-dimensional look, which I'm not sure you're going to see on film. And the light's not very good now, I've lost the light. But, got a good finish on it. It's come up like glass really. It does look quite a lot like stained glass. But it's been an absolute so-and-so. It's taken me all weekend off and on doing bits on this. Terrible trouble with this piece of wood. I had to redesign what I was going to do because of this huge knot. It's not too bad on this side, but on the inside there was a big bark inclusion which messed it up really. But there you go, that's it. I'm very pleased with this actually. It's probably my most spectacular piece to date, and it'll certainly draw some attention because it's so bright. I'm really pleased with that. It's my logo again. Very pleased with my logo, thanks to my brother. If you're into dragonflies, go and have a look at my brother's YouTube channel, New Forest Dragonflies. I'll put a link in the description. But he's a brilliant videographer, you know, gets some fantastic footage of dragonflies. Go and have a look. But there we go. I hope you like it. Please like, share and subscribe. And massive thanks to all my subscribers and all the lovely comments. And I do try and reply to everybody. Thank you very much. There we go, more videos coming soon. Cheers.
More videos coming soon.